Hello everyone, welcome to GS Core. So in our series of the daily current affairs through MCQs, we'll be seeing 5 multiple choice questions based on today's current affairs. So let's quickly glance through the topics based on which the questions have been framed for today. So the first one is the wet bulb temperature. Well, this phraseology and terminology came in news regarding the weather forecast. Right. So we need to understand the concept behind it to actually decipher the question correctly. The next one is about the machine to machine communication or M2M communication. Recently, the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, that is the TRAI, released the recommendation on the usage of embedded SIM for the M2M communication. You are well aware that how the SIMs are embedded into multiple hardware across cars, some of the most popular examples right now, right? Apart from that, there are other communication devices, for example, your UPI payment related speakers, etc. Right? So SIM is subscriber identity module. The next is about the Preventive Detention Law, and this has been in news because the Honorable Supreme Court has said that the advisory boards have to consider if detention is needed in the eyes of law. So the Preventive Detention Law and the advisory boards and their role becomes central. The next is about the foreign liability, right? And some statements and news items regarding India's foreign liability has been in news. Last but not the least, the question will be based on the GDP deflator and double inflation. This has been in news because of the certain questions being asked about India's GDP data, right? And hence these concepts are in news. So let us quickly move on to the questions that we have. So the very first question is about the wet bulb temperature. Like I said, it was in news for the fact that the rise in temperatures is getting closer to the tolerance limit of human survivability. Right? And in this context, the wet bulb temperature becomes important as a concept. So whenever such terminologies are in news, they itself are nothing but a concept. So we need to understand what wet bulb temperature is. So if you look at the wet bulb temperature, it is a temperature of adiabatic saturation, which is the lowest temperature that can be reached by evaporating water into air at constant pressure. It is measured by wrapping a wet cloth around a thermometer bulb and passing air over it. As water evaporates from the thin cloth, it cools the thermometer, similar to how human cools themselves with the sweat. Right? So concerns often moves around the threshold or the critical wet bulb temperature for humans, the point at which a healthy person could survive only for 6 hours. 6 hours, that is usually considered to be 35 degrees centigrade. So with regards to such questions of this particular nature, the skills and the approach involve the idea of application and deduction, without which you cannot solve such a question. Also, you need to know your facts clearly. So let us look at the question. Consider the following statements regarding wet bulb temperature. It is a measure of lowest temperature that can be reached by evaporating water into the air at constant pressure. That is what we defined here, and this statement is correct. Second, a healthy human could survive only for 6 hours when WBT is above 35 degree centigrade. This statement is also correct. IMD definition of heat waves include wet bulb temperature force forecast. That is incorrect. If you look at the wet bulb temperature, it is not captured in the IMF's definition of heat wave. So again, a concept of heat wave, as in what is a heat wave, becomes important. Okay, because the weather agency does not calculate wet bulb temperature of a particular place as such. If you look at the formatting is again how many, right, and not which. So therefore, you cannot use elimination. Hence, out of the three, 2 statements are correct. Therefore, the option to mark for us would be option B. Option B. Moving on to the next question. M2M communication, and this has been in news because the TRAI recently released certain recommendation on usage of embedded SIM for machine to machine communication. Now the concept at the heart are many. For example, the usage of SIM, the communication mechanism from the angle of science and technology. With regards to skills and approach, if you look at the format is statement 1 explains the statement 2 kind of a format. So we not only need to find the correctness or incorrectness of the statement, but also the interrelatedness, and hence the application as well as interlinking is a critical skill apart from the fact checking or the recall. So while approaching such a question, we should first check the correctness and the incorrectness and then look at the correlation. If one statement is correct or incorrect, then it is easy to use the elimination here. Okay, so let us read the statements. M2M communication enables devices to exchange data and perform actions without human intervention, facilitating automation in various industries. If you look at this statement is correct. So that completely leaves option C out of the window because it says statement 1 is incorrect. Second statement, in machine to machine communication, devices typically communicate through wired connections, ensuring secure and reliable data transmission. Now it is interesting that the current affairs was regarding SIM. So SIM are meant for wireless communication generally for all practical purposes. So this statement seems incorrect, and the moment the second statement becomes incorrect, we have the answer in front of us, right? That is option D. Option D. Moving on to the next question. Preventive Detention Law. So recently the Supreme Court, the Honorable Supreme Court, said that the advisory board, which is a part of the preventive detention law mechanism, have to consider that if detention is needed in eyes of law. So the concept here is preventive detention, what is allowed, what is not allowed, what is legal, and the allied agencies which are involved, the law enforcement agencies and their functioning and powers. So with regards to skills and approach, they demand application, recall and interlinkage. Also, you have to deduce the impact or implications, to be precise, of the action. So at times you are given a certain action and you are asked that whether that action is correct or incorrect. So it says, consider the following statements regarding preventive detention. A person under preventive detention has to be informed about the grounds of his or her detention. That is incorrect. Authorities can withhold to disclose facts which such authority considered to be against the public interest to disclose. So that is why some people are saying that the preventive detention law is draconian. So always look at the debate around such issues, and they raise the questions of why, which helps you understand the idea better. Second, the advisory board to authorize preventive detention beyond 3 months consists of persons who have been High Court judge, right? Rather, an advisory board consists of persons who are or have been or are qualified to be appointed as judges of the High Court. It is not who have been. So the devil lies in detail. It is not necessary that who have already been judges of the Supreme Court, and this makes this statement incorrect. So you see, there was a very thin line of difference. So please be very careful while examining such statements. If you see the format is traditional, so you can use elimination here. But in this case, since we have already deciphered that both the statements are incorrect, hence the option to mark is option D. Option D. Moving on to the next topic, foreign liability. And if you look at the format of this particular question, it's a straightforward statement based question. No guessing here. So first I'll talk about the skills and approach. It is largely on the factual lines, and you need the recall or retention skills. If you can, you can. At times, this statement comes in the form of deduction and application as well. That what will happen? Which of these following does not increase foreign liabilities of a country? So now this involves deductive logic. The news which made this question possible was that the India's foreign liability has seen a rise in the recent period in spite of rise in forex. Recently it reached an all-time high of around $630 billion, right? And therefore it is important. Now the concept here is that whenever you talk about forex liabilities, etc., on the one side there is the fisc, on the other side there are institutions. For example, the National Statistical Office, the role of RBI, etc., etc., and they make an important complex which we should be taking care of. Now the question says, which of the following does not increase foreign liabilities of a country? Since it involves application and deduction, so test each statement logically, and that is how you should approach this kind of a question, right? So again, the concept of FDI is also very important, FIIs, etc. Which of the following does not increase foreign liabilities? So how the foreign liabilities will be increased? When the country will have something to pay. Inward FDI. Inward FDI means that you have investment. So it will increase the foreign liability because the money is coming from outside and it is coming as investment to profit. So it will increase. Loan taken by resident entities. Again, if a resident entity takes a loan from outside, the foreign liabilities increase. Portfolio investment, FPIs, again the same logic similar to FDI. Inward remittances of non-residents. So if an NRI is sending dollars to India, will it increase our dollar reserve or decrease? it will increase, and hence it does not increase foreign liability. Therefore, by sheer logic, we can say that the correct answer is option D. Option D. So you see how from current affairs a static conceptual question has been framed. Moving on to the last but not the least, this question is about GDP deflator and double inflation. So first I will talk about the concepts. These concepts are needed. So if you see that the GDP deflator is a measure of the level of prices of all new domestically produced final goods and services in an economy. It reflects changes in the overall price level and is often considered as a broader measure of inflation vis-a-vis the CPI or the consumer price index, right? Whereas the NSO, National Statistics Office, uses the WPI as a proxy for the producer price index to deflate the GDP. Okay, so double deflation is a method used to calculate the real output and real income, right? So it was in news for the fact that the exposed have raised over, experts have said that there have been distortions in the GDP data of India due to non-usage of the double deflation methodology. So India uses a single deflator, right? And hence experts are saying that it is giving erroneous GDP data. So with regards to skills, since it's a question of economy and huge deduction application skills are needed because you have to judge the implications. So the correct approach is the logical deduction, which you should do apart from, yes, certain facts, because they can get intermingled in the statements. If you look at the format, it is again inexact, which I call as vague format, so you cannot use elimination. So the first statement is NSO uses the international standard measure of output prices, the producer price index, to deflate GDP. So in our brief about the concepts, we talked about that it in India, it is the WPI which is used as a proxy for the producer price index, and hence this statement is incorrect, and sheer knowledge of concepts can help me decipher whether the statement is correct or not. In double deflation, nominal outputs are deflated using an output deflator while inputs are deflated using a separate input deflator. That is correct. Unlike most of the G20 countries, India arrives at gross value addition using a single deflator. That is again correct, because in India, because the experts, the news which is there, they are saying that for the lack of the usage of double deflation method, the GDP numbers are incorrect. So out of the three, two are correct, one is incorrect. Hence our option to mark would be option B. Option B. So with this, we have come to the end of today's MCQs. However, you will find many more news articles, right, in our daily current affairs compilation, for which there is a link in description, right? That's all. Thank you.